Our next speaker, who is going to introduce our featured speaker, is the Cook County Board President. She was elected just over 2.5 years ago. Prior to that, she served as alderman of the 4th Ward and has been a dedicated community leader for over 2 decades. She earned her bachelor's and master's degree at the University of Chicago. She's married, has 2 children, and 3 superb grandchildren. Ladies and gentlemen, Cook County Board President, Toni Preckwinkle. Madam President.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. Our guest today is the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Chicagoland Entrepreneurial Center. The Chicagoland Entrepreneurial Center works with promising entrepreneurs to build the next generation of high-growth companies in the Chicago area. Previously, he co-founded the Google Chicago office over 10 years ago and actually has an email that says simply Kevin@Google. In his 10 years plus with Google, our guest today helped grow this office to more than 400 professionals. He is a charitable and civic leader, serving as trustee of his alma mater, Loyola Academy, among others. He earned a bachelor's degree from Boston College, an MBA from the University of Chicago, and has studied at the London School of Economics. He and his wife, Victoria, are the proud parents of 3 children, Jacqueline, Max, and Lizzie. I want to thank him very much for his service on the Cook County Council of Economic Advisors. I bring you Kevin.
Thank you, President Preckwinkle. It's been an honor to serve on the council, and thanks for all your leadership and for that kind introduction. She was going to call me Mr. Willer, but she went with Kevin instead, so thanks, because it's got to be more informal. I've been getting a lot of crap. Can I say crap? I've been getting a lot of crap. Right. Well, I'm going to check with Paul and Jay to make sure this works out, because I'm in a suit and tie. I think Jack gave me a little bit of heck already. Dan Miller gave me a little. They're all wearing, open shirts here because they wanted to look cool and hip for the startup thing, and I zigged when you zagged. That was how it worked out. I wore the tie and suit, so. But the usual dress for us in the startup world is jeans and a blazer usually. So, but I wanted to dress up because this is a very important formal group, and I really seriously am honored to be here today speaking with you. I mean, some of the people that speak here are just exceptional. So it's a pleasure to do this. I wanted to just point out a few people because it seems like that's what people do when they start up here. So. I'm going to point out my wife, Victoria, and my mother, Mary. Thanks for being here. I've got to point out the co-chair of my board, my boss of the Chicagoland Entrepreneurial Center, Jim O'Connor, Jr. Okay, Jr. right here. Great man, great leader. And then a bunch of old friends from Google, including John DeCola. We were there at the very beginning in Google Chicago, so thanks for being here, John, and my team at the CEC too. So thank you. And then last but not least, a really old friend, Tom Bookie's over here. I haven't seen Tom in a while, and I'm thrilled you came out today, Tom. You've been a good friend for a long time. So I'm sure I'll talk about some other people along the way, but what I wanted to talk about, I'm not as tall as you, President Preckwinkle. I got to hold this down a little bit. I was going to talk today about Chicago's startup community. So I'm the president and CEO of the Chicagoland Entrepreneurial Center. It's been around for a long time, helping out entrepreneurs in this city. Started by the Chamber of Commerce and the Commercial Club and the Mayor's Office. So great organization. But a couple of years ago, I took it over, came from Google, and wanted to do some work with entrepreneurs in Chicago. And we pivoted, I would say, is the word we use in the startup world a little bit. And we have a very specific focus on we call kind of high potential entrepreneurs, high growth entrepreneurs in the digital space. So a lot of us think about this as tech startups. So I'm going to talk about that a bit today. But before I do that, and I think this has got to be the first time it's ever happened in the club's history. I don't know. You told me 1903 1903, okay. Has there ever been a picture of, well, sorry, let me step back. You're supposed to show pictures of your kids sometimes in presentations, all right? This is something that I've been told, it's a good way to kind of break the ice at the beginning of the presentation. But how crazy is it that I actually have a picture of my kid and Jay's kid at a birthday party? So on the left here with the shirt Joseph on, that's Joseph Doherty. That's Jay's 4-year-old son, who is best friends by all accounts with my son, Max, who's apparently talking to the nice young lady right there. He's the one with the glasses on to Joseph's side. So I thought it was really neat that this was just past Sunday at Max's birthday, and Jay and I got to hang out. So I got to bring a picture of both our kids together. So that ends the children picture. Now we're going to get into some serious business. The other thing I like to do is always start with a quote. And a quote, in this case, I'm going to read it off, is by Thomas Friedman in the New York Times, talking about the great inflection. It's the mass diffusion of low-cost, high-powered innovation technologies, from handheld computers to websites that offer any imaginable service, plus cheap connectivity. They are transforming how business is done. A lot of folks think about startups or tech startups as, kind of the dot-com boom of 12 years ago and this excess and spending a lot of money and not creating a lot of returns, and then there was this bust and it was all very bad. That was 12 years ago, and some things about that time were bad, but a lot of good things came out of that time. In fact, Google came out of that time and has become one of the great companies in the world. But back in 2000, when John and I were there was nobody. There was nobody talking to us. There was nobody really knowing what Google was. There was a lot of other search engines, and we didn't really need another one at the time. But we thought, the founders had a cool technology, and maybe they were thinking a little bit differently and building a better mousetrap, if you will. And over the last decade, that's been proven to be true, I think, at least if you look at the number of employees and the products and the innovations that have come out of Google in the last decade, and it's one of the most valuable companies in the world. And I will get to this a little bit later when I talk about 1871, but we were in a shared office space at 401 North Michigan, John and I, in an internal office with 2 desks and 2 phones, and nobody would talk to us, and we'd call people and try and cut partnerships, and they said, no, that company's going to be out of business soon. You're just a .com. It's not going to work out. And you remember those times. And we fought the good fight. John would always say there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and there was. That was a public offering in 2004, and just the traction and the excitement around the business and what we were able to do. But when I think about entrepreneurship, I think about those days when nobody really believes in you, and you really got to kind of get up every morning and get in there and fight the good fight and try and follow your dream and build a company. So that was a good experience. But when I think about Chicago, and I think about why we can be, I think, the best place in the country, if not the world, to build a technology company, there's some people that are starting to look at us. And I got a couple headlines here from our friends at NBC and Cranes talking about something that came out in the fall. And this is something called the Startup Genome Project, where they went around the country or the world and looked at what were the best startup ecosystems. And Chicago made the list. A lot of people would be surprised to know that. We weren't number 1. Any guesses on what was number 1, Paul? New York. New York. Nice. New York's getting there. Hi, Ron. Silicon Valley is number 1, and Tel Aviv came in number 2. But Chicago came in 10, and that's exciting. That's good. So we're making some progress because the year before we were 15. So, all right, so we're kind of on the radar globally, and this looks at, do we have all the pieces in place? Do we have the ecosystem to build and the base to build great technology companies here in Chicago? So I wanted to bring you through some of the data, though, because a lot of folks are skeptical unless you show them hard facts. So there's a website in Chicago called builtinchicago.org. It was started by the community, and it's really a place where the digital startup community has come together to share stories and get connected and get access to resources to build their businesses. And they've been tracking a lot of the information about the startup community here. And what we found was, and this is from last year, I'm going to show you a couple infographics here, that there was a lot of companies launched last year. Almost 200 startups were launched in Chicago last year. This is actually more than in New York City, which is exciting because New York is actually doing a lot of great things too. And they tend to be in areas that Chicago is good at. So consumer web, marketing, e-commerce, things like that. Like, it's not surprising that Groupon, was created here in Chicago. And for the record, Groupon is a very good thing. Groupon put a spotlight on Chicago. It created a lot of jobs in a short period of time and showed that we can build these world-class companies here in Chicago. They're dealing with some challenges now, but that's what happens when you're a high-growth company and as you evolve. And I'm confident they'll work through those and be even greater in the future. But so more startups launched in 2012 than any previous year. So we've got a lot of companies being launched here. There's a lot of entrepreneurs coming out of our schools saying, hey, I want to create a great company here in Chicago. So that's a good sign. But that doesn't really matter if nobody's funding these companies. So we need a little bit of capital, right? And investors are, tough on these entrepreneurs. They're not just going to invest in any crazy idea, and they're not going to spend, put a lot of money into a company unless it's really showed, that they're going to do great things. And this gives you a sense of some companies in the middle, and then kind of the amount of money that they've raised. And so 59 companies raised over $1 million in 2012. The companies in the startup world don't need as much capital as they used to. They used to need to raise $5 or $10 million. Now they can raise $1 million and really, we call them lean startups, build their companies without a lot of capital. So that's good. That means that if it doesn't work out, those companies, the capital will not, there won't be as much capital lost as in the past. And sometimes these startups don't work out. The other thing we've seen in the funding world is that a lot of big investment firms from around the country and around the world are investing in Chicago in big numbers for the first time, really, at least in the past decade. If you're familiar with venture capital firms, the biggest ones like Sequoia and Kleiner Perkins and Battery and Benchmark and Andreessen Horowitz and NEA, all of these firms have invested in Chicago firms in the last 24 months in large amounts. That's a good sign too, because it shows that they're looking a little farther afield than just in Silicon Valley in their backyard or in Boston or New York. So funding is good, and these names up here may not be familiar to all of you, but you will be hearing about them a lot more in the future. These are our pipeline. These are the next innovations to come out of Chicago and the state of Illinois. But then we have to talk about exits, because exits are really what is the lifeblood of this world. Investors need exits at some point to take care of their LPs. The entrepreneurs, if they can get an exit, a lot of times will reinvest that money that they make. And these are good things. So we've seen in the last year $698 million plus in returns and from these exits, and then 26 acquisitions, one IPO. On the bottom are a bunch of logos of some of the companies that were exited. So this is good. So we've got kind of a story here, and I think some of the people in the room who know this world will say, "Oh yeah, we knew about that." But some people, hopefully, this is kind of new and surprising too. Again, this is not the dot-com bust of 12 years ago. This is real companies being created in Chicago, solving real business problems, getting real investors behind them, and selling those companies in some cases as well. So this is good. But it's a start, I would say. We have a lot of pieces in place, but we don't quite have it all done yet. We've got to keep working at it. So when you think about an ecosystem, when you think about what makes a great place, when you think about what makes Silicon Valley great, or Boston for a long time, or any place in the world that's great at creating innovation, new generation companies, you got to think about a few things. And I like to put them in buckets of human capital, financial capital, and social capital. When we think about human capital in Chicago, we are really good there. We have world-class universities here, right? People move here from around the world to go to school at our great universities, from our business schools, 2 top 5 ones with University of Chicago and Kellogg and a number of great other business schools, to our engineering schools like IIT, U of I, Champaign-Urbana, UIC. You have an endless amount of great talent coming here. I was just saying to Paul beforehand, I met a graduate recently of IIT who grew up in Jordan, and he moved here to go to IIT because he wanted to go to school there and then he graduated and built a business here that now employs about 50 people, and it's a growth business called Option City. Those are the kinds of stories that we have here in Chicago, and we need to continue to keep that talent here. When we think about serial entrepreneurs, this is really important. It's not an entrepreneur who's done it for the first time. It's someone who's done it before and will do it again. And that's the kind of person that investors like to put their money behind. These are people who know the mistakes. They made the mistakes potentially in their first venture, and they know not to make them hopefully again. So these serial entrepreneurs, we're seeing more and more of these here in Chicago, and that's a really good sign. In terms of financial capital, I talked about this a little bit, but a lot of great venture capital firms locally. All the folks at OCA Ventures and Lightbank and MK Capital and Origin and New World and Sandbox. There's a lot of great local venture firms, but also a lot of national ones coming in here. And then something newer in the last few years has been angel investors. And angel investors are usually high net worth folks who want to put a bet on a company. Usually it's someone they know pretty well because it's a high risk bet. But they want to support an entrepreneur, and they might give them a few $1,000s to kind of get the company going. And again, it's easier and cheaper to get these companies going than ever before. So angels are really rising in Chicago and have done a good job of filling that early capital need. And then social capital. And I should have had county in here, Tony. I had it in here, I promise. But city and state, and county government support. This is important. They're not going to create the jobs or create the companies, right? And I'm stealing this from someone, but they are going to create the environment, right, for these entrepreneurs to create the jobs. And we have really seen that in the last couple of years here in Chicago. Governor Quinn and Andy have been huge supporters of what we've done. Mayor Emanuel has been a huge supporter, and John Tolville, who you'll hear from soon here at the City Club, great supporters of what we're doing. And then President Breckwinkle and Kurt Summers and folks and her staff have been great too. You need that political support, obviously, to get credibility, honestly, in this city and make sure that we move our initiatives forward. And then there's a lot of community support organizations. I see Tom out there, Tom Kuzmarski, the Innovation Awards, have done a great job of banging the drum here for great innovation and great entrepreneurship in Chicago for a long time. So we see a lot more of that. And then at the end of the day, the only reason Google opened an office here, it wasn't that they liked John and I that much. They really saw customers here. And the reality of the situation is we have a lot of customers here for these startups or partners or innovation, partners where a startup can help solve a problem at a big company like a United Airlines might be working on something in their mileage plus world, which is really digital currency, and maybe a startup can help them out. We have the footprint of large corporations here, fourth highest state with 31 in the state, 8 in Chicago, 6th highest city, and then a quarter of all of them are really in the Midwest. And these are some of the biggest companies in the world, as we all know. This is really, really important for the startup community to thrive because they need to have those potential partners and customers to work with. So we've got to have that. But turns out we have some challenges. And these are some challenges. I'm going to talk about the third one a lot. But we have a couple others, and some other fine people in this room and around the city are working on some of these challenges. But the first one, this is not new, and it's not only our problem, but technology talent. There needs to be more technology talent coming to Chicago, joining companies here, building companies here. These may come out of our schools. They may come out of schools somewhere else and move here for jobs. But we need to be competitive to bring in that technology talent as much as we possibly can and keep it here. We'll give a couple examples a little bit later of some talent that's left in the past, and that's too bad. But if you look around Silicon Valley at every major tech company, it is run by Midwesterners almost without exception. It's really kind of amazing. It's something about our DNA in the Midwest where we're great at building these companies. Unfortunately, a lot of these leaders have had to go find the opportunities somewhere else, and we're hoping to change that here now. So Startup Chicago working with Corporate Chicago, this is just, building those bridges, making sure that startups have access and can get connected into helping these companies solve problems. Sometimes the big companies don't pay attention to the startups as much, and we need to kind of build some bridges, and some people are working on that as well. But when we got together a couple of years ago, the challenge we really wanted to deal with was, where do the startups live? Where do they work from? Many of you maybe work for corporations. You've got great offices and have a great place to work every day. Startups tend to not have a lot of money for nice offices, right? And it turns out the commercial real estate world, I'm looking at Brad, they want to help the startups, but they can't have a startup, sign on a long-term lease and then blowing up on them. So, it's been a little challenging for startups to find a home. And how do they come together? The community here has been a bit fragmented. People have been working out of coffee shops. They've been working out of people's homes. They've been working out of maybe a university setting if they have access. But at the end of the day, we haven't done a good job of creating homes for startups to come together, to sit side by side, and to learn from each other and get access to resources, especially at that early stage. So that was the problem that we decided to work on. So with the vision of J.B. Pritzker, who spoke here a couple of months ago, who's been a huge friend to the entrepreneur in Chicago for a long time, a couple of years ago he said, you guys to me and a couple other folks, including Steve Collins over here and some other folks, you go work on this problem of figuring out, where do startups live? How can we build a place for this? And so it turns out we are not the only ones who had this idea. It turns out they've been doing this kind of stuff in Boston and New York and Silicon Valley for a long time. So in spring of 2011, we got on a plane, or a couple of planes, and we flew around the country and we learned from folks. We went to places like the Cambridge Innovation Center. It's across the street from MIT in Kendall Square, and it is a place that has been working at creating an environment for startups for over 10 years. They have 400 startups working out of there. In fact, if anybody has an Android phone, that was incubated there before Google bought it. So this is a place that knows what they're doing when it comes to this, and they'd made the mistakes and learned a lot. And we got to go sit down with their leaders and learn from them. We went to New York and a place called General Assembly, incredible space that welcomes entrepreneurs there, and learned from them. We went to the West Coast and to Plug and Play and to Rocket Space and to the Hub, and learned from a lot of smart folks, and then came back here and decided, okay, let's build a plan that takes the best of what they taught us, but also make it uniquely Chicago to what we need to do. So we got together with a few folks then, and I've got to call them out because it was really a team effort. But Jones Lang LaSalle was a great partner in helping us find a space. Jack Keenan over there. And then the folks at Gensler, world-class architecture design firm based here in Chicago, that really got on board with the project and really, we were running this as a nonprofit, so we didn't have a lot of money for it, but really worked with us to flesh out the ideas and understand what we wanted this space to be. In fact, we had at Gensler's office every Wednesday for 6 months, we had something called Danish and Design, where we would go, bring in entrepreneurs, and we would put up the plans on the wall, and they literally would say, we like that, we don't like that, where's the coffee, things like that. And it was really neat to get that feedback to help us with our design process, but it also allowed us to crowdsource the plans. And that was just, in retrospect, really smart of us to do, because we kind of pre-sold the idea to the community. And this was all these folks who then said, hey, I'm part of that. I helped build that. I helped design it. So we had all these people essentially selling it at a grassroots level. It was a very cool experience. We picked the merchandise mart, and I'm showing you a map here that Gensler put together for us. They literally checked how far this space that we wanted to do in the mart would be from transportation. Transportation was really important here. The mart was perfect for us because it was a place where the trains plugged right into. The startup folks don't drive as much. They tend to take the train or ride their bikes or take buses. We wanted to be close to transportation networks. They also wanted to be in kind of a cool neighborhood, and we're here in River North, and River North was a great place to do this. Not the cheapest neighborhood to do it in, but we were able to work with the mart and make it a reality in that building. We also needed large floor plates. We wanted to build a 50,000 square foot space, but part of the value of the space is people running into each other and a lot of collisions and serendipity we talked about, and people meeting each other. And when you have separate floors, that kind of kills some of that energy. So, so one floor, 50,000 square feet, not a lot of buildings in Chicago that can accommodate that and work with us on it. The Merchandise Mart really was jazzed about the project. They really wanted to partner with us on it. In fact, they helped build the space through tenant improvements and working with us on it. It was an old art show floor, and they made it into a floor for us, and then Razorfish across the hall, which is a great partner. And then since then, they've signed Motorola Mobility as a massive tenant on 2 floors above us. So we're creating a lot of density in the Merchandise Mart. It's been a great building for us. The last thing I'll say about the Mart is that it's an easy building to get in and out of. In the startup world, our place is open 24/7, so we want to make sure people can come and go as they please and don't have to wait in long security lines and all that. So that building actually works really well for that too, because people do come and go so frequently, and it's kind of a 24/7 building. So that was in the fall of 2011, and again, this time frame is pretty quick. So spring of 2011 was an idea. Fall of 2011, we had this kind of plan built, and then this is our space, if anybody's been in it, on January 5th of 2012. And if it looks like, if you can see pretty well, it looks like a mine shaft of some sort. It looks like a really trashed space. It absolutely is. This was just a little bit over a year ago where we tore it down to its grass kind of brass tacks and just bringing it down to the core, and then built it back up around it. And again, thanks to the state of Illinois for the grant that helped build this place, $2.3 million grant from the state of Illinois. We didn't have, though, a massive budget for this, so we had to be really smart about how we spent the money. So we built it up, and we opened it on May 2nd of 2012. That was the grand opening. Some folks in the room may ask, why did you call it 1871? I always forget to talk about this, but when we were thinking about names, we could have called it Tech Center or Startup Center, but that would have been kind of boring and not very cool, not very Chicago. So we engaged with a brand firm here, VSA Partners in Chicago, that helped us flesh out some cool ideas. And I won't tell you the names that didn't make it. That'll go to my grave, I think. But 1871 was a kind of a controversial name. It was a really exciting name. We wanted to capture the spirit of entrepreneurship and innovation and technology that happened after the Great Chicago Fire. Some folks said, well, don't talk about the history, don't go back in time, but it's really resonated as thinking, how do we build the next Chicago? How do we capture that spirit of innovation in the future? And how do we build the next generation of companies here? So 1871 has become a great name. The URL was available. That was important too. And so much, in fact, that our friends in Washington, D.C., which we all should, whenever we're there, remind them of, they actually opened a place like this not too long ago and named it 1776. They asked if they could. They said, can we do this? I said, I don't own the name 1776, so you can do whatever you want. But we think, when they have influential folks coming to visit, that they say we were inspired by our friends in Chicago. So 1871 was born. What it is really basic. It's a workspace. It's a co-working center. It's a flexible space for early stage digital startups to work side by side. They apply. Everybody applies through the same process. We've received over 1,000 applications, and we've been selective. We have an independent selection committee of entrepreneurs and technologists who know what to look for, and they vote. They vote on all these startups. When they come in, they're on average 2.3 people, and we hope they find access to resources and a good environment where they can grow the company to maybe 10 people. So they're only with us for a little bit. They sit out in open space like a university library, or there's another spot called the reserved co-working space where they have a dedicated desk where they go back to the same desk every day. If you're interested, the dedicated desk costs $400 per person per month, and the open space is $250 per person per month. And in fact, there are people that want to work on their startups in their off hours. They have day jobs, maybe some of your employees, but they have nights and weekends memberships for $125 a person a month. But I don't know if that sounds expensive or cheap to you. Some people will say that sounds really cheap, and I think this audience might think that. But to a startup who's trying to conserve capital, that's about market rate. So they pay month to month though, so they can leave whenever they want, which is really important to the startups. We also have a lot of partners towards the right side of the map like the universities I mentioned, like the ISTC, Mark Harris here, been a great partner. Techstars Chicago, which is a world-class, nationally ranked incubator program that runs out of the space, and then something called the Starter League, which is an incredible school that teaches people how to code and design. They're helping to solve some of that technology talent issue. And the last thing I'll point out is we needed to have world-class coffee at this place because the startup said, if we're going to be there working, we need to have great coffee. So we partnered with Intelligentsia. I don't know if everybody realizes Intelligentsia is a local entrepreneurial success story here in Chicago, and they do have great coffee. They actually built a coffee shop in the space. It's their 4th coffee shop in Chicago. It's technically private, but you guys can come visit anytime you want. So it's really been a neat kind of environment to bring that all together. And I'm going to talk about IMSA in a second too. But here's some kind of visuals of what it looks like. I mentioned the members and the applications, but it's a very cool open space. There's no offices for startups, so there's no hierarchy really. It's all about sitting in the open space. A lot of people ask, how do you make sure they don't steal each other's ideas? I tell them that they should stop watching The Social Network. But the reality is, this is a collaborative environment. If someone's really worried about their idea, they should probably go, work from home or something. But it's really a place where ideas are kind of a dime a dozen at this stage. It comes down to execution, and it comes down to, getting it done and building your company. So there's a lot of collaboration, a lot of peer mentorship. It's very cool like that. We actually don't have to force much of it at all. We've kind of become, we'd like to think the central address for Chicago startup community, kind of the town square. So we have a lot of folks come through there to kind of showcase Chicago and what's going on here. We have a diverse population, I would say, and this is interesting. Now, the startup world, a lot of people think it's a bunch of 22-year-old dudes, and there are a lot of 22-year-old dudes in this, but you would be surprised probably to know that our average age of an entrepreneur in 1871 is 30. We have some entrepreneurs in their 50s and 60s, so it's not just open to the kids. It's also a place from a lot of folks from outside Illinois. 50% of our entrepreneurs are from outside Illinois. Maybe they came here for school and then they started a company here, so that's a good sign. They're very educated. And then something I'm really proud of, 28% of them have a woman founder or co-founder, which might sound to some people kind of low, but that's actually well above the national average. Women are just underrepresented in this kind of tech startup world, and we've been able to find a lot of great women entrepreneurs, a lot of great women leaders in Chicago, like Genevieve Thiers, who started Sitter City. She's one of our board members and just a great leading women entrepreneur in Chicago. And then a lot of serial entrepreneurs. This also talks about what they need to get out of 1871, which is really they need to build their business, get revenues, and raise some capital and find some good talent. So. When we talk about the town square thing, we bring in a lot of folks to speak about their experiences. On the bottom right here, we have something called Founder Stories each month that was created by Pat Ryan Jr., who is just a great entrepreneur, a great leader in Chicago. Every month he has an in-depth Charlie Rose type interview with an entrepreneur who's been successful here. In this one, he's interviewing Brian Johnson, the founder of Braintree. If you're not familiar with Braintree, it's probably one of our best, fastest growing companies here. 300 employees, I think. They've raised $70 million from 2 of the best venture firms in the world here in Chicago. So they're in the mobile payment space. But Pat does an interview where he asks them about their challenges and opportunities, their entrepreneurial journey, and it's very cool. And it's open to the public too, and it's free, even better. So you all should check out Founder Stories at 1871. But it's really been a way for us to bring the community together into our space. On weekends, we have things like hackathons and meetups and startup weekends. Hackathons are a good thing. A lot of people say you think hacking is bad in the startup world. Hacking is good. They're maybe trying to solve a solution. Like we partnered with World Business Chicago recently. They did a logistics hackathon where they had large data sets of logistics information, and developers came in on a Saturday and tried to build some applications around it. So very cool stuff that allows the developer community to come together. We augment that with workshops and office hours where we have experts and mentors come in and share their learnings directly with the entrepreneurs. And that's something that, you can't underestimate the value of that to an entrepreneur who needs an answer about how they should structure their company or how they might raise a round of capital or what they should do about this Facebook API problem they're having. the ability to plug into mentorship is so important in this world. And what's really neat is Chicago tends to give back. Entrepreneurs tend to give back with their time and their knowledge, and we're seeing a lot of that. In fact, we have 120 active mentors, but we've had far more people volunteer to be mentors. So it's really exciting that we're able to see that. And then when we think about a showcase, and these are my kind of picture slides, but for this audience, we have Mayor Emanuel and Governor Quinn. That was from way back, before we even opened. And then down here in the middle, we've got our friend British Prime Minister David Cameron came to visit when he was in town for NATO. He came at 8 in the morning on a Sunday, which was a little tough to get a bunch of startups out of bed and get them there, but we did it. We bribed him with free coffee, and David Cameron. If anybody's met, I had never met him. He's an amazing guy and really understands the entrepreneurial world. He has a place called Tech City in London that he talks about a lot, and has been overheard mentioning 1871 in New York and Boston, according to some folks around him. So we're excited that we're able to welcome leaders like that. This is an image of our auditorium, again, at 8 in the morning after a blizzard. Steve Ballmer, the CEO of Microsoft, was in town, and he came and spoke to a bunch of leaders in the startup community about Microsoft's plans to build great, help support great innovations all over the country, all over the world. So it's, we're welcoming to everybody. Even though I worked at Google, I can actually have the CEO of Microsoft over. It's all good. And then a couple other folks, Steve Chen, Dick Costello, Tim Armstrong, all these folks are, leaders of companies like Twitter and AOL. Steve Chen's a great story or a bad story, depending on how you look at it. This is a kid who grew up in Palatine out in the suburbs. He went to the Illinois Math and Science Academy for the gifted kids. He went down to U of I Champaign-Urbana, got a degree in computer science, and then joined his buddies in the Valley at PayPal. And then a couple of years later, decided to start this little video sharing site. They thought it would be cool to upload videos. That video sharing site's called YouTube, and they sold it a couple years later for $1.65 billion to Google. Why did we lose Steve Chen? Well, we lost Steve Chen because we didn't, have an environment here maybe. We didn't have a place for him to go. We didn't have a community for him to plug into. So our goal is to not lose Steve Chen and then to invite Steve Chen back to see what we're doing. And he was really impressed with what's going on in Chicago. So that was exciting. We've gotten a lot of media coverage. It's been an exciting story. The New York Times did a piece on the MART about how great, the MART is doing in terms of, reinvigorating itself and embracing the digital economy. We've been really excited about the recognition they've got because they took a risk on us and they were a partner early on. And then just across the board, from coolest offices to the startups growing in Chicago, it's really great to see how the media is responded. And Waylon Wong's here. Thank you, Waylon. You've been awesome. And then, people want to know, what does this all mean, though? What has it done? Does it matter, right? It's good, Kevin. You got some cool pictures of some VIPs, and you got a good, space that looks pretty and all that. But at the end of the day, what does this really mean for Chicago, Cook County, the state of Illinois? And, we measure it. So it turns out in the last year, the companies, the 225 startups at 1871, have created 800 jobs in this city and in this county and the state, and then project to create another 1,300 jobs in the coming year. So that's good. We're not going to, show up with 50,000 jobs overnight, but 2,000, high potential, high growth company jobs here in Chicago, that's a good start. We're really thrilled about that in the first 2 years, if that comes to fruition. And then they've raised a lot of capital. They've either raised it or invested in themselves, nearly $30 million. So that's great. That's investment in companies here in Chicago. And then adding to the economy, revenues, right? Revenues are important, because then revenues generate a tax base at some point, right? These startups don't tend to pay a lot of tax because they don't have a lot of revenues, but they're growing them. And $13 million in revenues here, just out of the 1871 companies, has been really exciting to see that. So it's a good first year. As I've said, it's working. It's not done, and we have a lot of long road to hoe here. But what's interesting about this nonprofit model is we don't invest in the companies. We don't own the companies. The companies, when they move out, don't want to ever come back and talk to us again. That's their right. So they're our customers. So we're betting on the fact that entrepreneurs in Chicago give back, that they will, if they are successful, they will give back. And the whole model is predicated on that. So, so far, so good. We've had some folks move out, and they do come back around. Frank here at Market X is our latest alumni, just moved out last week and got his own space. He was one of our first folks that came in early, so thank you, Frank. So it's been good to see so far, but we got to keep working at it. And, you know, I want to close on this part just saying it's been a community effort. I mean, this does not happen with one person just saying, I'm going to do this. And it doesn't happen without all the support from all the parties in Chicago, from the universities to the public sector to the corporations that have been sponsors like JP Morgan Chase and E&Y and Google and all these companies. This doesn't happen without a community coming together to build something that's good for Chicago and good for our future. So, you know, I'm as bullish as anybody on this world being great, but we got some more work to do. And I wanted to kind of close with something, with just list out some things that other people are doing here that you may hear about, but you'll be hearing a lot more about in the future. Some developments that are happening here on either the city or the state or the county level that are really, you know, trying to address some of the other challenges we have. There's something that the University of Illinois is doing called UI Labs, which is really exciting. Carolyn Nowinski and the folks there are trying to bring more of that talent from U of I into Chicago companies and not letting it go away as much as it has in the past. There's been some announcements by both the state and the city about creating kind of an 1871 for the biotech world, the bioscience world. That's not our expertise, and we don't work in that space, but this idea of bringing together entrepreneurs and capital and universities and corporations into a common space to create energy is a very good idea, and when we love that they're hopefully going to build these places soon. And then the Starter League, they partnered with CPS to teach teachers how to code. You know, these in the engineering world and the technology world, the unemployment is like negative. It's 0%, and then people do like part-time jobs. There are so many great paying jobs in the technology world for engineers and developers. We just have to create more of them. And we have our challenges at CPS, so I think, you know, what the Starter League and Neil and Mike are trying to do to teach teachers and hopefully eventually teach students about coding and the joy of, you know, being a computer scientist and a computer developer, that is really important in the future. So the city has announced broadband infrastructure. We should absolutely be a leader in this and have some of the best high-speed access here, and we applaud that effort. And then we need more early-stage capital here. We're working on that. A number of folks in the city, a lot of the entrepreneurs who've had success, created something called the Firestarter Fund that helps seed some of these early-stage businesses. And then the last, and Tom and the Innovation Awards and the state and the Innovation Council and World Business Chicago have been working on this, creating programs to connect startups to corporations. How do we do that where it adds value to all parties, where it's good for the corporation and good for the startup, so that we really can partner in our backyard. So a lot of good stuff going on in Chicago, in this state, and we really have an opportunity here at the end of the day to build Chicago into the greatest place in this country to build startup companies. There's no reason we shouldn't be you know, on the level of a Silicon Valley or Boston in the years to come, but we've got a lot of work to do, and we got to be patient, but I think we've got the right leaders in the room to do it. So I appreciate your listening to my presentation. I really enjoyed speaking with you, and I'd love to take any questions, so thank you.
Well done. We'll just take a couple of questions. I have one in advance, and we're City Club Eve. Raise your hand if you have a question. We'll just take a couple because we always adjourn on time. By the way, any rumor to the effect that if it wasn't going to be 1871, it was going to be called the U.S. Eastland?
Come on.
Well, if you're going to pick a disaster, pick a disaster. I mean, you know, Titanic. By the way, it didn't start.
Oh, no, hold on. I'm going to address it. Hold on. I'm going to address it just because people bring this up. If you ask the head of the Chicago History Museum, if you call him up and you say, what is the story of the year 1871? He will not even talk about the fire. He will talk about what happened after the fire, that we built the great modern city that we know and love today. So, yes. Just saying.
Yeah. He also wants to keep his job. Okay, here we go. Enough of that. Dan Miller, where are you, Dan? Oh, comfortably dressed. How big an impediment to growth in the entrepreneurial sector is Illinois' dismal financial condition? Remember where you guys sitting. Right.
Okay. So, really important question. I had the joy, and I hadn't done this before, but I got to be on like Fox Business News once. They have a little like dark cave somewhere on Wacker Drive where you sit in there with an earpiece and a camera and you can't see anybody and they're talking in your ear and you're on national television. And they said, we're going to talk to you about startups and entrepreneurs and all this stuff. And then at the end, the anchor in New York goes, and what about Illinois being the worst place in the country to, start businesses and all that? And, tried to zing me and all that, right? So I said, hey, agreed. Okay, it's a challenging environment. We all know that. We can't run away from that. But the other two places that have great entrepreneurial ecosystems tend to be California and New York, and they're not in much better shape. So let's look at the level playing field. The entrepreneurs, as I said, they're not creating a lot of revenues. They're not worried about the fiscal situation here as much when they're starting their companies. I worry about when they start to take off and start growing and start hiring a lot of employees and they start getting picked off by, other states. In fact, Austin, Texas, some folks were in, here this week talking to startup companies, and we've got to address that and we've got to fight that. But right now, the entrepreneurs don't tend to be worried about it at this stage. They're going to have to deal with that in the future, so we're going to have to figure it out. Andy. Oh, sorry.
How about a big round of applause? Well done. We got parting gifts. Parting gifts.
Thank you.